Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this evening. It's quite nice and sunny and warm where I am. I hope it's lovely where you are too. We've got 3 presentations today, all on a range of topics. As I said, this meeting will be recorded and we'll be uploading it to YouTube when that's ready and uploaded. So yeah, without further ado, I'm actually going to pass over to Carina because you didn't come to listen to me, you came to listen to the research that we've got on show today. So yeah, take it away, Carina.
All right, let's have a go at this. I need to get my screen in order. Cool. Okay, so can you all see my my slideshow?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, hi everyone. I'm Carina, and my dissertation project was an investigation of physiological stress responses to workplace interactions. And we specifically looked at the role of ambiguity and hierarchical distance. So as a bit of a background, I'm sure we all know that clear, open, accurate communication at work has tremendous benefits. However, clear communication is not just a luxury, not just something that it's, nice to have. When communication breaks down, it can actually become the leading cause of occupational stress. And, you might think this is something that's easily avoidable. However, as humans, we have an inherent desire to appear as pleasantly as possible in social interactions. Unfortunately, the way we've evolved to do this is in situations in which, for example, we are asked a favor and we know we cannot deliver, we tend to respond more indirectly or ambiguously. So, for example, instead of saying, sorry, I can't help you with your task, you might say something like, have you tried ChatGPT? But this strategy often backfires because it increases the risk of misunderstanding and communication breakdown. And from the perspective of the person who needs a favor, it can be quite unpleasant because we also have we're also naturally averse to ambiguity. That being said, we don't actually, I suppose, scientifically know how people react to ambiguous responses in workplace interactions. So what we did was we asked ourselves, does being in receipt of indirect or ambiguous communication contribute to the stress experienced in the workplace? And to answer this, we actually conducted the first study to ever assess the impact of workplace interactions on employees' physiological stress responses. And to measure stress responses, we used electrodermal activity, which I will be referring to as EDA. And we exposed participants to interactions with differing levels of valence, directness, and relationship context. And just to explain how these were defined. So the responses participants received to asking favors were on a scale from positive direct, so for example, yes, I'd love to attend, to negative direct, such as, no, sorry, I have other plans. And the relationship contexts were non-hierarchical and hierarchical. Our hypotheses were based on our pre-registered analysis plan, and we expected electrodermal activity to be significantly higher in the negative direct, negative indirect, and ambiguous conditions, and in contexts with hierarchical distance. But we also planned a linear regression, and similarly, we expected negative valence, indirect communication, and hierarchical distance to predict higher stress levels. So just going back to how the responses were categorized, this is where we expected stress levels to be significantly higher. Okay, so how did we do it? In terms of participants, we had quite strict requirements. We needed monolingual English speakers born in the UK to control for language and cultural confounds. We also limited our participant group to being under 60 years old due to issues with the strength of the electrodermal activity signal after that age. And we, of course, needed our participants to have some work experience to be able to relate to the experiment. And finally, because the experiment was timed to the average reading speed, we needed participants with no reading disabilities. Now, in terms of numbers, we aimed for 75 participants based on our power analyses, but because of the time constraint, we only included 35. However, data collection did continue after I submitted my dissertation. In terms of the procedure, participants came to the lab, sat at the computer, and while we recorded their EDA, they watched a series of WhatsApp conversations, pretending to be the main sender. They received responses to requests, and they rated their likelihood of compliance based on their valence and directness. And just to, I'm sure this is a lot to take in, so just to clarify, I'll show you an example of the task, and I will ask you to try and answer the follow-up question. Okay, here we go. Do we have any thoughts?
Maybe 2, somewhat unlikely.
Okay. Eloise?
I think I'd say similar.
Though I could see from your faces that you weren't quite sure. Is that so? Because if you would have responded not sure, you would have actually been in line with our results. So basically, we looked at everyone's judgments to check the validity of our stimuli, and we found something really, really interesting. So not only did people use the response valence and directness as cues to the other person's intentions, but there was also consensus in these judgments. So this means that we can probably begin exploring the patterns in communication that people interpret as confusing, and maybe in the future develop frameworks to improve communication and decrease ambiguity in the workplace. For our main research question, I have here a violin plot that clearly shows that stress levels weren't different across the conditions. So our hypotheses were not supported, but not only were they not supported, we actually conducted Bayes analyses that provided strong evidence against an effect of valence and directness on stress levels, but only marginal evidence against hierarchy. And based on the strength of the evidence, at least when it comes to valence and directness, we can exclude statistical power as a concern, because if you remember, we only had just under half of the planned sample size. The main takeaway, I guess, is that our results have important methodological implications. So because of the very artificial experimental environment in which our study took place, the relatively invasive equipment, and the long visually similar visual stimuli, we expect participants to not really have been able to engage with the task properly. And there is also an effect called habituation, which occurs when the stress response becomes flattened because of the fact that the stimuli are not visually loaded and emotionally loaded enough. It's worth mentioning, though, that we also measured participants' stress levels when they were making the actual judgments. And the results were similar, except for hierarchical distance, which did predict higher stress levels. So I guess we could say that there is a difference between measuring stress levels when simply receiving the message and measuring stress levels when having to make a judgment based on that message. However, when it comes to hierarchy, it would be really useful to have enough statistical power to get a clearer result. But anyway, what I would like you to take away from this is that people do use the language valence and directness to interpret and predict others' intentions, that these predictions are pretty unanimous, and that this can eventually be used to improve communication at work. And also that highly artificial experimental settings and stimuli that encourage habituation might not be suitable for electrodermal activity research in the workplace. And finally, hierarchy might predict stress in outcome-focused communication at work. But of course, this needs more investigation, ideally with enough statistical power. Thanks so much for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Carina. Just while people, if they're thinking of any questions they might have, are you happy to share your LinkedIn in case anyone thinks of any questions after or wants to reach out and talk about any of your research?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Am I okay to stop sharing my screen just so I can?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
I have a question.
Yes,
How obviously using EDA is quite a I guess a novel technique, especially in sort of MSc research. It's not something that individuals tend to have the access to or opportunity to use. How did that come about, and how did you find using that kind of measurement?
So it was a very ambitious project. My supervisor and I thought that measuring stress in terms of indirect communication would be really interesting, because us being from non-British backgrounds, we found, sometimes when you'd ask someone a favor in your culture, it's usually it's quite common to beat around the bush in providing an answer, especially if it's a rejection. So we thought, how do these people actually perceive this indirect communication, and is it stressful? And obviously, my supervisor being a very experimental researcher, we thought, the best way to measure this is EDA, and we happen to have all the facilities we needed at the university. So that's the route we went down. In terms of actually using EDA for the experiments, it was a huge challenge, because yeah, as you said, it's not very common that someone does a project involving EDA. So I had to learn a lot of software, a lot of theory, kind of self-thought in the use of EDA. So it was very challenging, but definitely very, very rewarding.
Yeah, interesting. What an opportunity. And I find that quite interesting, actually, how it's looking from the outsider's perspective and wanting to understand UK people and the way we communicate. I find that a very interesting angle. Usually I think sometimes we're we feel like we can be very like UK centered with UK research because that's, you know, our where we're studying from, but to be doing research in the UK, looking from the other cultural perspective and wanting to understand our culture is very interesting.
Yeah, and also what's really strange to me is that you know, you're very used to the type of responses that you provide in certain situations in your culture, but then when you're asked to actually judge how clear they were, people agreed that, you know, the responses that are usually used to reject someone are ambiguous. So it's I don't know how to explain it, but it's very paradoxical, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, totally agree.
It's like, you know exactly what you mean by providing the ambiguous response. You know you're trying not to upset the other person, but then you also struggle with interpreting it if the response is given to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, indeed. Great. Any other questions? Always say you got to do the 10-second count in your head. Typical Nikita there. If not, thank you very much, Carina. That was really interesting, and it's really great to hear about an experimental study taking place at MSc level. Excellent. If that is all, obviously, if you have any other questions, please do message Carina after. Oh, I think we just had a quick one in the. Karina, are you able to see the chat, or should I read that out? Were there self-reports of stress/uncertainty to see if it correlated with the EDA?
Yeah, so this was great question, actually. This is something that I mentioned in my discussion points. It wasn't in the presentation though. So it would have definitely been amazing to include self-report measurements of the, you know, the mental state the participant was in, because the issue with EDA, like it's an amazing measurement of arousal levels, but it's not always bad arousal. It's not always, you know, stress. It could have also been situations such as, I don't know, someone getting excited that they knew what sort of response they were going to make, or maybe a certain situation elicited a certain memory for someone. I don't know, anything like that. So it would have been amazing to use a self-report questionnaire, but we didn't because we didn't have the foresight. So, but it's a really great question, and I'm impressed that you've actually thought of that.
Hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Mm.
You said that they were still continuing with data collection. Is that something that they've incorporated since, or?
I don't think they would have, because this was a pre-registered study. So another thing that was a huge limitation for us was the fact that we had never conducted this kind of, you know, ADA research before, but we had to actually anticipate all of the methodology and all of the analyses beforehand, so we can pre-register them. And once that pre-registration went through, we couldn't really go back and alter any, you know, any steps or parts in the methodology. It's all about, like, you know, questionable research practices and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But it would, you know, it's like, research is basically providing building blocks. So I'm sure someone in the future might come across our study and decide to not make the mistakes that we made.
Not mistakes, it's just learning. Just learning.
Yeah, just learning. Just experiments.
There is a second part to that question, but I wonder if you could potentially, if you can cover it, respond to that in the chat, and we'll move along so we can get through the other two presentations within the hour.
Yeah, I think I answered the second part as well, because yeah, I did.
Cool. Okay, perfect. Thank you for your questions, David.
Thank you.
And thank you, Carina, for your presentation. Excellent. Great. Okay. Cool. Okay, we are going to swiftly move along to Mohit. Mohit, if you want to share, the floor is yours.
Yeah. I guess you can hear me all. Yeah. Just let me say my screen. Is my screen visible now?
Yeah, I can see that.
So hi everyone, my name is Mohit and I come from the University of Nottingham, and currently I'm working as an admissions officer there. So this is my research on the mediating effect of personality. I just took one aspect of Big Five, that is neuroticism, on the imposter phenomenon and organizational commitment. Making it crisp, I took a poster presentation to just see what the background of the study and the methods and then the results, and we will go to the practical implications and conclusion. So starting with the background, so a lot of studies have been done regarding the relationship between imposter and organizational commitment. But the relation between personality or mediating effect might be one of the cases I wanted to explore. Taking that study, the previous background, imposter phenomenon was positively related to continuous commitment, and negatively associated with effective commitment. So there are three types of organizational commitment, as we can see here. So first one is, as you can see, is continuous. Second is normative. Third is effective. And a lot of like the organizational commitment studies are related to the 5-dimensional aspects of personality, such as agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism as well.
Mohit, sorry to interrupt you. Could you increase slightly the font or the display?
Sure.
Can all of you see?
Can you see the screen now? Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, going back to the methods. So we chose young professionals from India, mostly from IT and consulting industries. As you can see, they are 47% female and 53% male on the studies. And the average work experience was 2.85 years. So some of the tools that we used is for the Big Five, that is PCL profile match 2. That was sponsored by the PCL company. And I also used organizational commitment scale, that is Myers and Allen's. And for the imposter phenomenon, we used the Clance CIPS scale. Going to the results, we found that imposter phenomenon was significantly a positively significant result to the continuous commitment, as most of the studies was mentioning that as well. Interestingly, we found that women scored significantly higher in continuous commitment and neuroticism scale. And regarding the young working professionals, there was a higher tendency of imposter than the other age groups. So as the average age is 23 to 26 years. And some of the implications that imposter phenomenon we feel like it's about the continuous commitment to the company. So the career instability and working the new job, starting their new job can have to motivate them to work on that same company. We also found that some of the implications of imposter phenomenon have an impact on the employee retention. So in the future, it's more important to have understanding the different personalities and the imposter phenomenon and relating to the organizational retention. Yeah, that's all, I guess. Thank you. I'm open to questions if you have any. By the way, this is the email. If you have any questions, and LinkedIn profile, you can reach out to more data. If I can say, yeah.
Thank
Can
you,
I
Mo.
just, sorry, can I just clarify something?
Yeah, yeah.
Or rather ask you to clarify something. So when you talk about this continuance commitment, how do you define that again?
So basically, it can be like a need to stay, like for the financial commitment, or just we need financial sustenance, so we want to just be in that company. So as you can see in the third side, need to stay.
Yeah,
So,
sorry, it's still a bit blurry for me.
oh, sorry. Yeah. So when we start a new job and we see like there is no many opportunities, or maybe many other reasons like the promotions or the growth opportunities, that can also include in the continuous commitment.
And did you say that people hire in the imposter phenomenon, I guess, have higher rates of continuance commitment?
So if someone, let's say there's an imposter feelings, and if they feel like they can't get more opportunities in the other companies, or they feel restricted in some way, so it means they will be likely to remain in the same company for a longer period of time, if that makes sense.
That makes sense, yeah. Cool, thank you.
Mohit, did you say that? I have a question. Just to follow up, Mohit, did you say it gets better with job duration, the imposter syndrome? So
Yeah.
typically there's a learning curve when people join new workforce. And so were you able to identify a time period typically within which?
Basically, when I researched more about the imposter and the work experiences, it says it increases, like it gets better with time. But in this particular study, I have mostly like 80% of the age group between 23 to 26. So I couldn't I couldn't had that, I don't know how to explain.
The longitudinal aspect of the data. Yeah.
I didn't have that data to support the previous researches. Yeah, I think so. It reduces over a period of time.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how it plays out, over time, 6 months, a year or so, and then going back with your questionnaire to see how people feel differently and what other variables can impact, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Interesting study, both of you, Carina and Mohit.
Thank you so much. Is there any risk of organizations seeing your study and deciding that they're gonna just actively make people feel like they're imposters just to keep them for longer.
Very tricky subject, to be honest. Like, I don't know how to explain it, because when it gets personal, maybe I have some imposter feelings, but how I can, provide my research on that. So yeah, I don't know, it's very tricky. And even when I submitted my research for presentation on the conference, that is EAWOP, we have to be very specific on what is imposter phenomenon and neuroticism scale on that. And yeah, but I guess young professionals have more tendency because they are starting a new job, and it's very natural and common to have that feelings because they lack some skills.
Did you happen to come across anything on how to reduce imposter syndrome?
Yeah, in like some of the things like ADC meetings or professional development coach meetings in companies, that can help. From my experience and all the observation I had.
It's good to know that there's a treatment.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? So did you say you were presenting your poster at the EWOP conference?
Yes, on 26th May. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, good luck. I hope that all goes well.
Yeah, I should be more prepared on these questions, I think.
Well, this was a good practice run. It gives you a good refresh, and then you can do your main poster at the EWOP conference.
Hopefully.
Okay, and I assume because your LinkedIn was on your poster, you're okay for people to reach out to you if they want to connect or have any further questions.
Yeah, definitely. I will share my screen again if someone wants to scan a LinkedIn. I'll share the LinkedIn ID as well on the chat box.
Great. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to move along to our third presenter then. I'm on mute. Priya, were you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I did get dropped off sometime during Carina's presentation, so I'm a little iffy, but I hope nothing happens during the presentation. Let's start. I will definitely keep my camera off because it slows down my internet connection considerably. But if you could just put up the slides.
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, Eloise. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the background for this study was, the name of the study is a socio-technical system study for fast-moving consumer goods industry, guided by Professor Matthew Davis at Leeds University Business School. A bit of business context is that the FMCG industry, despite their steady success in the 21st century, recorded a drop of 80 and 90% among the top brands, as well as overall a drop in growth rate between 2012 and 2016, which was attributed to their low responsiveness or flexibility. And an additional issue that was identified in these organizations was lack of motivation among its workforce and a high cognitive and social demand, job demand. Right, so if we can move on to the next slide. So the purpose of this study was to offer an alternative approach to analyzing barriers to flexibility or responsiveness, and also analyze causes of low motivation and sort of extend an alternative to the traditional approach of technologies, which is rigorous supply chain management or adoption of agile methodologies. Little bit of note on the literature and the framework. The core idea behind socio-technical systems is that organizations are made up of two subsystems, the social and the technical, with multiple elements that interact with each other in non-linear formats to act as an integrated whole in a way that changes to one part of the system causes a ripple effect on other parts of the organizational system. The diagram that you see to the right was developed by Professor Chris Clegg and his team at Leeds University Business School, and it provides a set of 6 guiding principles or cornerstones for analyzing organizational events. This was used as the key framework to conduct the study. Initially, the scope was extended to FMCGs. However, because of overlapping characteristic, the study was later extended to participants from other fast-paced industries, including IT services, management consulting. This was in UK and India, as well as engineering sectors in particularly petrochemical engineering organization in the US. So we wanted to take a holistic perspective, understand different approaches to analyzing the phenomena that we were trying to study. A set of 16 semi-structured questions were used, semi-structured, non-standardized. It was a qualitative study, obviously, but a set of 16 non-standardized semi-structured questions were created using the socio-technical frameworks and extended to 5 participants who were interviewed over a period of 30 to 45 minutes. These were then thematically analyzed into 12 broader topics, and then desegregated and segregated into 3 final key themes of organization structure, motivation and work design, and job strain. Organization structure here refers to the spread of the organization, and in this context, it tries to identify barriers which could have caused low responsiveness, lack of motivation, or increased job demands, social and cognitive job demands. Based on the details that were gathered during the interview, we analyzed external factors, external barriers such as fast-paced pace of the industries and the environments in which they were operating, a fickle customer base, as well as internal contingencies such as span of control, excessively formalized processes. In one extreme case, I remember one interviewee telling us, or rather sharing, that it had caused multiple turnovers and stalled work processes. And this seemed to be the pith of the reason for low responsiveness. The other aspect of organization structure that it analyzed was work practices in digital teams, so that delves more into culture. And 4 out of 5 participants attested to the fact that there was no attempt to unify multinational or multifunctional organizations, as well as there were frequent changes in process and leadership, which were poorly communicated. In terms of motivation and work design, the dominant theme when interviewees were questioned was on work preferences and challenges. Each of the 5 interviewees expressed keen interest on making a high business impact or altruistic impact on their work, including customers, subordinates, and on their peers. They all expressed a keen interest for, regardless of their role in the current organization, they all expressed an interest for problem solving and higher order thinking. The other key aspect that was prominent from these interviews, or that emerged from these interviews, was person, job, and person and environment fitment issues, which was the key reason for dissatisfaction among employees. There were multiple instances of role and responsibility mismatches, and this also caused a certain amount of job strain related to challenges in role, as well as a lack of time and lack of coaching and training opportunities, particularly for first-time or new managers who were hired from a technical background and into a people development role. In terms of, this is another figure that I have tried to quote from the McKinsey report, which says 80% of global transformation project leaders identify human factors as key to long-term success. So human factors, particularly goals, culture, people, these on the right, on the left side of the framework that you see, they have a longer impact on other aspects of the organization. So some of the policies or some of the insights that were gathered from this study that could possibly influence, policy making in organizations could relate to need for less centralized decision making, opportunity to work in autonomous groups, as well as allowing employees to perform higher order thinking tasks that involved higher order thinking, need for better communication between business functions as well as by leaders in case of business changes, particularly the big ones as well as the small ones, opportunity for training new supervisors in people management roles. These were some of the findings, and that could potentially help shape organizational policies or help redesign structures. Any questions so far?
Is that finished, Priya? Would you like me to stop sharing and open to questions?
Yeah, you can stop sharing, Louise. Do you have any questions? Oh, I will enable video.
Any questions? I love how we've had a range of different types of methodologies today. We've had very heavily experimental, we've had survey and quant, and we've had qual as well. It's been great.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to ask, how did you come across this sort of research question? Where did your interest within these topics sort of originate from?
Interest originated from, I have 12 years of experience working with different organizations. So it was in a large and a key part of my responsibility from starting from an analyst role was to understand the business environment and the context for which I was solutioning, and this included, anything between mostly related to L&D and training. But when I started, the key inspiration when I was in Leeds was obviously the socio-technical systems framework, because even people in organizations do not operate in a vacuum. So it really interested me to see how the framework brought all these different elements together, and it showed a ripple effect on different parts of the organization and what a person does to, what the leadership goals are, etc. So yeah, I would say that was the inspiration.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I do. I find it so fascinating how with occupational psychology, organizational psychology, you can put on an event like this and you can have you know, topics on a range of different things, but when it comes down to the core of it, it's all how we behave in the workplace. Yeah, so it's a fascinating topic to study, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and that was the other thing. Organizational psychology is used a lot of the times at an individual level, at an employee or an individual level, a work group level. What this framework also does is allows an opportunity to analyze everything from they call it the meso and the micro and the macro. So starting from, the entire organization down to a work group, down to the individuals, it has this graduating effect, which is very interesting, and it also can be used as a design framework to when we are designing work processes. So I wanted to from a brief and somewhat overlaps with behavioral aspect of the study when we are trying to find out what the barriers are to accomplishing a certain task or achieving a certain goal. And technology also is never 100% functional. So no technology technological investment will yield 100% result. It's always in conjunction with the human factors as well as the tech factors. So I liked how the framework brought everything together, and the vast system theory that exists out there, which is very interesting from an OD perspective, organizational design and training perspective, sort of.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you, Priya. And the same question as I've asked everyone else, are you happy for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn if they think of any questions at a later date, or want to connect because they're interested in the topic in your background?
Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent.
So I could share, I'll just quickly share my LinkedIn profile on the chat.
Perfect, thank you. Great. Any more questions? And if not, we can all go and have our dinners. Thank you for everyone for coming to listen tonight, and thank you to Carina, Mohit and Priya for coming to share your research. It's been fascinating to hear about what you've been studying and the outcomes that you've found. It's all really important.
Thank you so much for having us.
Anytime.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I hope you'll have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, Eloise. Thank you, everybody. Good evening.